before. I went live once before on my own, but that was just a matter of going on YouTube and using the YouTube live feature through Google Hangouts, which was actually pretty easy. But now
in theory, we are live, ladies and
Hey,
gentlemen.
that was my test to see if we were live, to see if the audio would pop up. So we are in fact live, Anthony. It came up on the other system. Now, guys, we want to do a few tests real quick, just because we are using new programs. We're using new programs here. We're using one program that allows us to use Skype as a video angle so that I can have Anthony on here alongside me. Another program that keeps us side by side so that we can have split screen. So this is a lot of new stuff here. We're going to do a couple of tests real quick just so we can see how things are going. First, how is the sound? Is it too loud? I can't hear myself without going onto my other computer. Does it sound distorted? If so, I can turn down the volume. So everyone wants to tell me what the sound is like. And Anthony, go ahead and talk for a minute, just at your regular tone, not when you're super enraged and screaming at people.
Yeah, well, somebody made a comment about the boxes behind me, so maybe I should say something about that. Those boxes are actually books. I was planning to move. I just graduated from seminary. We were planning to move. The move hasn't come to pass as quickly as we had anticipated, so I'm actually only half packed. Some of the books are still out. You can probably see some of them still up, and there's stuff in the other rooms, but yeah, I'm trying to be prepared for when the move is official. So
the point is, you don't normally live like this.
No, I don't.
Okay, all right, we got you.
I normally live like a slob, like vocab.
Okay, so everyone is saying the sound is good here. Someone said a little loud, but everyone else is saying someone is saying too loud and distorted. Others are saying the volume is perfect. I'll tell you what, I'll turn us down slightly, because most people are saying it's fine. Some people are saying turn off slow mode. Guys, this is a test. We need to be able to read comments, and without slow mode on, there's no way I'll be able to read comments at all or respond to comments. They come too fast. They come faster than I can glance at them or read them. So certainly now, when we're just getting started, we want slow mode on so that we can figure things out. Now later, maybe we find out that that it's better to just let everything keep flying through there, and maybe we see something. But we'll keep this on for at least the first few episodes. Again, we are going to be learning a lot about this entire system. Now, I happen to learn programs pretty slowly. If you've watched my testimony video, I was locked up when you guys were learning how to use computers. So it takes me a while to learn how to use computer programs. Now, once I learn them, I'm awesome. I challenge anybody out there. Get on iMovie, and I'll get on iMovie, and we'll see who makes the awesomest video on just using iMovie. I can't use iMovie anymore. I have to use Final Cut, so I'm learning Final Cut. It's taking me a while, but I will soon be the best in the world using Final Cut as editing software, and we will very soon be using all of this really well. It didn't take vocab very long to learn to use similar programs. I'm using different programs, but we'll be able to get it. Now, I'm supported primarily through Patreon, and so I told my patrons that we're going to start off shows by responding to basically everything's going to be coming at us at once, very rapidly. So we're going to kind of take things in order. I want to respond to a couple of questions from patrons first. Because I wouldn't be able to do any of this, or really anything I do, without people supporting the ministry. So I've invited them to post questions on Patreon, and I said that I'll get them first. Now, Anthony didn't have a Patreon account. Anthony works about 70 hours a week, some of it ministry related, some of it not ministry related. If you know Anthony, you know that he is one of the most knowledgeable people on the planet when it comes to Islamic issues and the discussions between Islam and Christianity. So I'm encouraging him to get involved with stuff like this, so that he can share this knowledge with future generations here. So if you have questions that you would like addressed, the easiest way to get that done now, and to guarantee that your questions will be considered, is to jump on Anthony's Patreon page, which he just started today, and that's in the description box if you wanted to click on. And guess what? If you can only contribute $1 or $2, that's fine. That's awesome. That's the idea behind crowdfunding. Whereas in the past, if you wanted to do full-time ministry, you had to have some people really, really kicking in and supporting you. The idea now behind crowdfunding is if you have 1,000 people following your work, and they kick in $1 or $2, that adds up really quickly. Now, to be clear, if you are really financially struggling, don't worry about that. Don't worry about supporting us. You can support us in other ways, by sharing our videos, by learning the arguments, by having discussions with people using the arguments. But if you want to see people like Anthony be able to focus on ministry, especially given his knowledge of Islam, quick way to do that is to jump on Patreon and go that route. So we're going to start out each episode, again, learning by trial and error along the way. We're going to have some glitches. I don't even know what a lot of these settings that I'm looking at mean, but we'll figure that out as we go along. And probably, at least for the first week, we'll stop to ask questions about things like sound and other issues, just to make sure everything's running smoothly. But like there's other things I need to do, like assign moderators. I have no idea how to do that yet. So it might be a free for all for a little while.
Sure.
We will figure this stuff out as we go along. And the cool, just to give you an idea for where we'd like to go with this, I would like to see eventually, not just me and Anthony, but maybe another 2 or 3 Christian apologists on here regularly, not necessarily all on at one time, but 2 or 3 on a sort of rotating schedule on per night. And I'd like to see a free-for-all, right? Like accepting all challenges throughout the world. I understand that on using this software, I am able to post videos. I'm able to play videos. If people send them, I can post those. And so that would be cool if we start saying, okay, if you have a question you'd like us to respond to, make a video of your question, send it in. Then we can actually play a person raising an objections from Muslims. We can invite Muslims to send us arguments or objections, and then we can play them and then respond to them. And it would be cool eventually to get some Muslims actually on the show. They can contact us by Skype, get on Skype, and we can have them on here for debate. So I'd like to see sort of a every night free-for-all, but right now we don't know if that's going to work. We don't know how all of this is going to work out. So we're going to have a little test period. Anthony, again, works about 70 hours a week. I told him, hey, can you clear out this spot? He's normally working right now. I said, can you clear out this 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock spot for 2 weeks, and we'll see how it goes. So we'll just see how it goes. So right now, as of right now, we're going to do starting today, and then go today, Thursday, and Friday, and then we'll take the weekend off. We're just going to stick with weekdays, but we're going to go weekdays for the next 2 weeks, and then depending on how many people are watching, how interested people are, then we can modify it then. If we want to change it and make it 1 or 2 days per week, we could do that. If we decide to scrap the idea, we can scrap it. If we decide to go every night, so 7 days a week, we could do that. If we decide to bring in other people, we can do that. But yeah, so this is a lot of what you learn on YouTube is just trial and error. You do something, you see if it works. If it works, cool, you keep doing it. If it doesn't work, then you change up the method. So with that said, we're going to look at a few questions that were sent by people on Patreon. One I really want Anthony to respond to. There are 3 that are pretty easy. I'll go ahead and give those really, really quickly. And then after that, so the normal schedule that we're planning, and this we might modify this at any point, but just as far as thinking about the basic structure now, we're going to start off by asking asking a few questions from patrons and then responding. After that, normally, if there are comments or questions that we don't get to in the course of this hour, but we see them the next day in the comments section and think, oh, that was actually a good question, we wish we'd responded to that, then we'll go ahead and respond to that the following day after we've seen it. And then it'll just be looking at the live chat. And I know I'm supposed to be somehow following the live chat the entire time while talking. My brain is not adapting to that nearly as quickly as Vocab's did. Vocab can somehow be talking and following the live chat and so on. I will get the hang of it. But for now, we're just going to have to learn as we go. Now the cool thing is, if I have a question or comment ahead of time, I can actually set it up to where it appears on the screen. In theory, I'm trying this as I go. But in theory, I can post a person's objection as we go. Hey, I see Renee there. Now let me see if I'm able to make Renee a moderator. Oh, she's already a moderator. Someone made Renee a moderator. I don't know how that happened. That's awesome. So I already have moderators on there, and I don't even know how I made them moderators, unless it was for the way it was set up a long time ago. I also see that there are a lot of people jumping in on Super Chat, and that's actually... I forgot about that. So, okay. It's all new to us. So the general approach will be, we're going to respond to some things by patrons. We're going to respond to Super Chatters as we go. We're going to respond to anything from previous days that we didn't get to. And then other than that, we'll just address issues from the chat here. And how much we can get to will depend on sort of how fast it's burning through there. So let's go ahead and... let me acknowledge the Super Chatters because a bunch of people are jumping in there. We have South African. Please do a video on South African farm murders. We'd have to study that. It's not exactly my topic. So I would really have to think about that because we're dealing with a lot here. Now, is that an Islamic thing, like the farm murders, or like a racial thing from the days? Follow up to the days of apartheid. Don't know much about that. Jesus is God, grace to faith, says God bless. Well, thank you. Other Super Chatters. Apple Goo. Didn't leave a comment, but thank you for the Super Chat. And Jordan Marshall says, hey guys, 2 questions please. Who is the Dajjal, and is he the Antichrist? And 2, how to respond when Muslims say Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, so Jesus won't return as a prophet. Now, Anthony, you want to respond to either one of those? So, who is the Dajjal? Is he the Antichrist?
Well, yeah, in Islam, the Dajjal is considered the Islamic equivalent of the Antichrist. However, it's not the same as what you find in Scripture. One thing that's interesting, though, is when you read the hadiths about the Dajjal, one of the interesting things is that it gives you something of his description. And what it reveals is actually quite significant. If you've seen some of my videos on Allah's anatomy, you'll see why this is significant. The hadith reports about the Dajjal repeatedly say that the Dajjal is one-eyed, and the Muslims will be able to distinguish him from Allah because Allah is not one-eyed. In other words, Allah has both eyes. So Muslims do think of the Dajjal in their system as the Antichrist, but it's not the same thing as what you'd read in Scripture. In Scripture, the Antichrist is defined by John in 1 John as someone who denies the Father and the Son. So, if anything, Muhammad is Antichrist. So 2 things there. One, the Dajjal is not Allah. He's distinguishable from Allah because he has one eye, Allah has 2. And secondly, the concept of Antichrist in Scripture is someone who denies the Son and the Father, and that's certainly Muhammad, not some other figure. Well, it could be another figure as well, but Muhammad is included in that.
All right, now the other part of that was how to respond when Muslims say Muhammad is the seal of the prophet, so Jesus won't return as a prophet. Now, it's required in Islam to believe that Jesus is returning, but there are Muslims who've recognized this as a problem, especially Muslims who interact with Ahmadis. Ahmadis are an Islamic sect that is often regarded as heretical because they believe that the second coming of Jesus has occurred in the person of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. So when Muslims say, well, those guys aren't real Muslims, the natural response is, well, you're claiming that they're not real Muslims because they believe that a prophet came after Muhammad, and yet all Muslims are supposed to believe in a prophet who came after Muhammad, because you all believe that Jesus is returning, right? So you got Muhammad, who's the seal of the prophets, no more prophets after that, and yet it's part of Islamic doctrine that Jesus is going to return. And so the Muslim response is, yes, but he's not returning as a prophet. He's not returning as a prophet. And what you can do is, and maybe we'll do something longer on this, but I see the comments building up massively, so we're gonna try and get through these quickly. What you can do is you can actually read some of the descriptions of Jesus and his return in Islamic sources and point out how these would require some sort of prophet-like characteristics. So Jesus, according to Muslim sources, is going to come and he's going to abolish the jizya. Well, wait a minute. If jizya is set in motion in the Quran and Jesus comes and he gets to abolish that, well, he would need some sort of status as a prophet. A regular guy, a regular human being, isn't going to be able to abolish something that is in part of the Quran. So he must be giving some revelations as a prophet, or he would just be in rebellion. So I would say look up some of those, and you can find some things that require Jesus to be more than just a regular guy or just an Islamic ruler coming back to rule. So thank you for that. Black Pearl, thank you for jumping in with the super chat. Brian Damage, I've seen you on lots of times. Rick in Texas sent $10, and I think I'm down to the bottom here, but they're popping up very quickly. All right, let's go through a couple of the questions that were sent to me by patrons, and in theory, I can put them up on the screen, which would be awesome. So I'm guessing people can see that. Wade asks, would it be wise for me to approach Muslims at my university? I don't think I could go at it with the same gumption as David, considering I don't know them. Now, one, yes, it would be absolutely wise for you to approach Muslims at your university. If by my gumption you mean the same way I do it on YouTube, do not approach Muslims like that. I want to be clear, there are different ways of interacting with Muslims in different settings. So if I'm interacting with YouTube and I know that there are ISIS supporters and so on watching it, I come with a certain approach. If I'm in a debate and I know that this is a more scholarly setting, I don't come at people the same way I would come at them on YouTube. And if it's kind of a one-on-one setting, a Muslim you meet on a college campus, no, you wouldn't use the same approach that I use on YouTube. But we actually recorded this several months ago. I haven't got around to editing it yet. I said I was transitioning from iMovie to Final Cut, and I need Final Cut to edit this, but I had to learn Final Cut while editing Islamicized Me, so I'm now in a position to edit some of the videos we've made over the past months. But me and Vocab Malone and John McCrae made a video titled How to Share the Gospel with Muslims. And that is this is made for the kind of approach that you would want to use if you're meeting a Muslim on a college campus, or if you're meeting a Muslim at work, right? Not blasting away like it's a free-for-all, or blasting away like it's a debate or anything like that. So how do you interact with a Muslim in that situation? And one thing that's very easy, so this would be sort of the first tip. Other than that, well, I'll come out with the video probably in the next week or two. I'll post it. But one quick, easy point to remember is your average Muslim, if he takes Islam remotely seriously, would love to talk to you about Islam. He would love to talk to you about Islam. One, because if he knows anything about Islam, Muslims are commanded to invite people to the way of Islam. And two, because he believes that you've been misled about Islam by Western media and people like David Wood, and you guys have this negative view of Islam, and he would like to correct your views about Islam. But that Muslim has also learned that these can be sensitive topics, and so there are Muslims who are reluctant to bring up Islam in a discussion, or to just walk up to people and start talking about Islam, even though they'd really like to talk about Islam. So one thing you can do is just give them the opportunity to do that. You can just give them the opportunity, and that can be something as simple as, hey, I see what you're wearing. It looks like Islamic gear to me. I've heard a lot about Islam. I've looked into it a little bit, but I would just like to know, could you tell me what you actually believe? Because I know that there are different groups of Muslims, and individual Muslims can believe different things. So could you tell me what you believe? And that chances, I mean, imagine you as a Christian, you would love someone to come up to you and ask you that, right? So if you imagine it from the Muslim's perspective, he would love to talk to people about Islam if given the opportunity. So all you have to do is give him the opportunity. That would set the conversation in motion. And for those first conversations, I would just ask lots of questions about what he believes. After that, start to transition into questions about why he believes. So okay, so you said the Quran is perfectly preserved. Why do you believe that? And find out what the evidence is. And at the end of the day, people who say that sort of thing have no evidence, because the evidence totally refutes it. So that would be kind of some general pointers, and then the relationship will unfold at that point, and then you'll start getting into giving him responses to some of his claims about why he believes certain things. In other words, if he says that I believe the Quran has been perfectly preserved because there's no manuscript of the Quran that has ever had one letter difference and so on, you can look it up. You can look that issue up and start asking him some simple questions about whether that's true, and showing him some sources in the hadiths and so on. You can even, just to be clear, you can even get more aggressive, but do it in a non-confrontational way. In other words, suppose you wanted to bring up Aisha, right? Now you obviously, if you're involved in a conversation on a college campus, you don't want to go up to a Muslim and say, hey, your prophet was a pedophile or something like that. It's not going to be a lasting conversation. But there are less confrontational ways to bring up the exact same information that won't send a Muslim, off to never interact with you again. So you could present the same information after you've had a couple of discussions. You can say, hey, I was reading this article by this total whack job named David Wood, and he said this is the history of Muhammad. Now, David's this total nutcase, but he's giving sources. So I'm wondering, could you look at those sources and give me your perspective? Because I do not want to believe, and this is true, you don't want to just believe everything David Wood says. So you can say, hey, I don't just want to believe what David Wood says. I would like to know the position of Muslims on these issues. And so could you look at these sources? Could you look at this article, read the sources, and get back to me and give me your perspective? Notice, you're getting the same information across. Matter of fact, you're getting a lot more information across than if you just walked up and said Muhammad was a pedophile or something like that. You're getting a lot more information across by getting the Muslim to read some sources, because you're asking for feedback. So in that situation, you can bring up the most sensitive issues imaginable because you're asking for feedback and so on. So and chances are the Muslim's going to be happy to read those for you and get back to you. And again, the conversation keeps going. And as you go on, you can start asking questions. What do you believe about Jesus? Well, here's what I believe about Jesus. So why don't we get to the bottom of this? You believe he's merely a human prophet? I believe he's Lord. Why don't we discuss that? You believe he didn't die on the cross? I believe he died on the cross. Why don't we get to the bottom of that? Why don't we investigate that? And then that's how I would approach it on a college campus. Very different from what I do on YouTube. Although the same overall structure is there in place, but it's adapted for more personal settings. Now, I wanted to get to a question for Anthony here. It's actually a two-parter, Anthony. But Samuel, and I'm blocking out last names on here because I don't want anyone harassed who doesn't want to be harassed or something like that. But Samuel has a two-parter here. But he says, how do you respond to the following comment made by a rabbi? Looking for Jesus in our Bible, the Old Testament, is like finding Muhammad in the Torah. So the objection here is, Christians, you know what it's like when Muslims come and say, hey, Muhammad is mentioned in the Bible. Here's the prophecy. Here's the mention of Muhammad. You know how silly it sounds to you to take these passages and twist and distort these passages. You know how that sounds from a Muslim. Well, guess what? That's what it sounds like to a Jew when you say that you have prophecies about Jesus in the Old Testament. It sounds the same. So that's part one. And then the other part is, where in the Old Testament does it say that the Messiah would be killed and then return again to finish the job? So there are prophecies about the Messiah in the Bible. Where would you get the idea that the Messiah is actually going to come, and then he's going to die, and then he's going to come back to finish his role as Messiah? And he says, I am a Jew who converted to Christianity, and my Jewish friends are all over me for this. So, Anthony, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, interesting background here. I met my wife, we both worked at a pizza shop when she was 16 years old, and at the time, she was a practicing Jew. Her family have a extensive background in Jewish history that they talk about for days. But this, over time, my wife, while we worked together, she would ask me questions about Jesus. And I kept answering her questions, and I thought there was something more to this. But eventually I told her, you should come to church, you should listen to the preaching. And, through that whole process, she eventually came to faith in Christ. However, her family, of course, didn't, and her grandparents were irate. Her father was a constant source of problems, and I remember every day he would come over and we would argue. We'd argue about the Bible, and ironically, he didn't know a whole lot about the Bible. He insisted Jesus couldn't be found in. And so one day I said to him, his name was Dave, by the way, David,
Sweet
good
name.
Jewish name. Yeah. And one day he came over, and I already knew what I was going to do. And some of you may have heard this before, but I don't know where I got this idea, but I know it wasn't original to me. But I said to him when he came in, I said, Dave, I said, let's not argue today. Let's just have a good time. I said, I'm wondering if I can just read something to you, and just get your honest opinion. I won't respond back to it. Maybe I might just make one little comment, but other than that, I have no intention of debating. And so he said, sure, go ahead. And so I read to him Isaiah 53. And after I concluded reading Isaiah 53, I said, what do you think about that? And he says, well, I don't believe it. He says, Jesus, we don't believe in Jesus. I said, what do you mean you don't believe in Jesus? And he says, we don't believe that stuff that you just read. And I said, Dave, I'm not reading to you from the New Testament, I'm reading to you from it. Now, you all know what he would have done if I told him where I was reading from. He would have said, that doesn't say what I think it says. But because I didn't tell him where it came from, he simply gave it his honest response, which was, this sounds a whole lot like Jesus, the Christian view of the Messiah. And that actually gets into the second question as well, because Isaiah 53 is a very clear description of Messiah's suffering and death. Throughout the text, it speaks of him being crushed, beaten, whipped, and so forth. And it's only one of a number of passages that speak of Messiah's death. Psalm 22 is another classic messianic text that speaks of the Messiah dying. I would also argue that there are other passages, it would probably take some time to unpack it, other passages that one might not at first notice as a reference to the suffering of the Messiah, but it's there. For example, if you look in the New Testament, Jesus repeatedly predicts his coming suffering. What's interesting is how Jesus does that. He repeatedly speaks of the fact that Scripture said that the Son of Man was going to suffer, die, and rise again 3 days later. Now, why would Jesus repeatedly link his suffering and death to that title? Because that, in fact, is what Jesus does. Jesus does it in Mark 8, he does it in Mark 9, he does it in many places. Well, what's interesting is when you go to Daniel 7, you have this text where there's a man, and this is startling to Daniel, there's a man riding the clouds of heaven, approaching the Ancient of Days. Now, the reason this is startling to Daniel is because throughout the Old Testament, over 100 times, this is always a description of God's mode of transportation, if you will. God is the one who rides the clouds. You see it in Isaiah 13, in other passages. God rides a swift cloud and comes down into Egypt. It's metaphorical language, but the idea is that God is the one who's coming in a dreadful way. Well, Daniel sees a man riding the clouds. And so this is startling to Daniel. Why is a man riding, if you will, the divine chariot? Why is a man assuming the prerogative of God and even going right up into the presence of the Ancient of Days? Well, what's interesting is that there's only one other occasion when you have a man approaching God with the clouds or through the clouds, and it's the high priest on the Day of Atonement. Remember what the high priest would go through the incense and approach into God's presence through the clouds. And so, in effect, what you have in Daniel, and again, I can't give you all the details of this, but what you have going on in Daniel is a picture of the great high priest coming to God through the clouds, and that's further filled out in Revelation 5. Remember, in Revelation 5, you have a similar throne vision, and everyone is weeping, including John, because no one's found worthy to approach the one seated on the throne and take the scroll from his hand. But finally you read that they see a lamb who has been slain standing in the midst of the throne. He's worthy to take the scroll. So you do in fact have numerous statements in the Old Testament that the Messiah would suffer and die, and you even have these sort of cloaked references in Daniel 7 as well. Now, I would say that what I think is behind the question of your Jewish friend is the idea of where does it say that Messiah will come in two stages, right? Where does it say that he will first come to suffer and die, and where does it say that he's going to come in a glorious fashion? Well, interestingly enough, this is really more a argument of later Jews who have rejected Jesus. It's not something that you'd find in a lot of earlier Jews. Even in the Talmud, for example, you'll find there are two passages that the Talmud discusses that it's trying to deal with because they present two different pictures of the Messiah. It's Zechariah 9, where it speaks of Messiah coming humbly and riding on a donkey into Jerusalem. But then you have a passage like Daniel 7, where Messiah is portrayed as glorious, riding the divine the clouds, and being given worship and universal dominion, and so on and so forth. And so the way the Talmudic rabbis dealt with that is they said, well, if Israel is repentant and righteous, then Messiah will come to her humbly. But if Israel is in rebellion against the Lord, then Messiah is going to come with the clouds and he's going to destroy her. Now, I would say that's, you don't get that impression from reading these passages that one might be fulfilled on these conditions, another one might be fulfilled on these conditions. They're both given as absolute prophecies. In other words, both are stated as something that's yet future. And so the Jews themselves recognize that there's a tension, and their way of dealing with that was to make up this artificial or arbitrary idea that one passage refers to what Messiah will do if Israel's repentant, and one is what Messiah will do if Israel is righteous. So I would say these passages are among the many that state that Messiah will come in two different ways and at two different times.
And Samuel, don't forget that that we have additional reasons to believe that this is revealed in the Old Testament. Namely, you've got Jesus rising from the dead, and he's the one explaining Scripture. In other words, if I'm going to listen to anyone explain to me what these Scriptures mean, the correct way to interpret Old Testament prophecies, I'm going with the guy who rose from the dead. You know what I mean? And so, if you go through what Anthony just said with your Jewish friends, and your Jewish friends grant that it's even possible to interpret these texts like this, well, great. If you can interpret it that way, then Jesus rose from the dead, and he's the one who would require us to interpret things like that. By the way, Anthony, along the Isaiah 53, I had a similar experience where Sam Shimon and I read Isaiah 53 to a Muslim woman, and we just read the entire passage, and we go, "Who's that?" And she goes, "It's Jesus." And it's like, how can we just read a passage? You grant that it's about Jesus, and it's written 700 years before Jesus walked the earth, and you still don't get that these are prophecies about Jesus here, right? So, in other words, you can read that passage and you'll have Jews who say, oh, that's talking about Jesus. You'll have Muslims who say, oh, that's talking about Jesus. And it still just doesn't click to them that you're dealing with some genuine Old Testament prophecies here.
Yeah, let me throw in,
okay.
that actually brings up a good tactic that people can use. I remember years ago, actually a year after I had been converted, so sometime around 1994, I made the acquaintance of a guy who was hostile to the Christian faith, and one of our frequent topics for conversation was the deity of Christ. And every time I would talk to him and point him to a particular verse and then explain it, he would always respond by saying, that's just your interpretation. And I didn't know how to respond to that at the time, but it was really quite annoying, so it just gnawed at me. And I thought every time I bring up a passage, he's just going to say, that's your interpretation. Well, yeah, that's my interpretation, but that doesn't make it wrong. You know, what's your reputation? But anyways, one day he came up to me, and this is after saying this to me like 15 different times. He came up to me, and before even saying hello or anything else, he just said, Jesus is not God. And I replied by citing John 1:1. I said, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then he replied, you can all anticipate it, he replied by saying, Jesus is not God, you're misinterpreting that. And it dawned on me, and I responded to him. I said, I didn't give you my interpretation. I gave you a quotation. And so your response shows that you understood very well what the text means. Mm-hmm. You weren't responding to a quotation, or to an interpretation, but a quotation. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same thing. You know, when people know what you're citing, then they automatically start throwing up all the objections. You know, they know better than to say we don't believe that, or something along those lines. They they want to look like they believe in Scripture and that they're following the Bible and so forth. So if they don't know what you're citing, they'll give an honest answer instead of a defensive answer. Mm-hmm. One other thing I wanted to add about Jesus in the Old Testament is it's not only that we have predictions about Jesus in the Old Testament. Remember, the Old Testament itself predicts that the Messiah would be God. Isaiah 7:14 says he's Emmanuel, God with us. Isaiah 9:6 says he's the mighty God. Jeremiah 23 says he's Yahweh, our righteousness. Malachi 3 says that he is, the Lord who's going to come to his temple. So you have numerous references throughout the Old Testament to the divinity of the Messiah, and of course that's confirmed in the New Testament when it says that the Word was God, and then in verse 14 of John 1 it says the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Because of that, then we can expect not only to find Jesus in the Old Testament by way of predictive prophecy, types and shadows, but also active. Jesus personally active in the Old Testament. And we could probably do a whole show on this, but just a couple of passages that are, I think, worth just throwing out there for further reflection by people. But in Genesis 18, you have the account of the Lord appearing to Abraham, and he announces two things to Abraham. First, that Abraham is going to have a son, Isaac, at that time next year. And then also he announces to Abraham that he's going down to Sodom and is going to destroy it. Well, when you go into the next chapter, in chapter 19, you read in verse 24, it says, then the Lord, and the word is Yahweh in the Hebrew text, the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord from heaven. So here you have the Lord who went down into Sodom, raining fire and brimstone on Sodom from the Lord out of heaven. In other words, you have two persons who are being referred to as Yahweh. Mm-hmm. And again, if you look at the Talmud, you'll see the Jews wrestled with texts like this. They didn't know quite what to do with it. And so they came up with a number of bizarre explanations. Another passage really quickly is Exodus 24. In Exodus 24:1, it says, then he, referring to Yahweh, then he said to Moses, come up to Yahweh, you and Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. So in Exodus 24:1, Yahweh is telling Moses to come up Mount Sinai to Yahweh. And again, the Jews looked at this text and they thought, why in the world does it say Yahweh told Moses to come up the mountain to Yahweh instead of saying, come up to me? It sounds like there's two persons in view here. And what's interesting is, and this is what the Talmud actually observes, in the preceding chapter, in Exodus 23, the Lord promises Israel that he's going to send a specific figure ahead of them to lead them out through the wilderness into the promised land. Here's what it says in 23:20. Behold, I am going to send an angel. And here I should pause for a second to explain that the word angel is misleading to many people. Most people think the word angel has reference exclusively to created heavenly spirits who are, attending upon God's throne or sent by Him to minister to those who are heirs of salvation. But the word angel in both Hebrew and Greek just means messenger, and you can only tell what kind of being is in view from the context. And so, for example, I quoted Malachi 3 a minute ago. The full text says, "I'm going to send my messenger ahead of you, and ahead of me, and he'll prepare the way." That passage is cited in John 1. It's cited several times in the New Testament, and it's applied to John the Baptist. John the Baptist is the messenger who's going to prepare the way for the Lord. Obviously, John the Baptist is not an angelic figure in the sense of a winged creature or however else someone might think of angels. So the word angel simply means a messenger and refers to anyone who's sent on some sort of mission. So Exodus 23:20 says, "Behold, I am going to send an angel or a messenger before you to guard you along the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared." Now listen to what the Lord says about this messenger. "Be on your guard before him and obey his voice. Do not be rebellious toward him, for he will not pardon your transgression, since my name is in him. But if you truly obey his voice and do all that I say, then I'll be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries." So this messenger is someone who must be absolutely obeyed. He has the authority and power to withhold forgiveness and to punish Israel if she sins. And God says those who are obedient to and submit to this messenger, God himself will be an enemy to their enemies. Now, who does that sound like? Well, a Christian would quickly answer that sounds like the Lord Jesus. But coming back to Exodus 24, what the rabbis observed is that in context, when the Lord said to Moses in Exodus 24:1, "Come up the mountain to Yahweh," he's referring to this messenger whom God says, "My name is in him." However, what they tried to do is they tried to say the angel was just Gabriel, and he's being called by the Lord's name. But that doesn't fly. I mean, there's no text of Scripture that would justify saying that it's really Gabriel is called Yahweh. Really just it's a desperate maneuver to try and avoid an obvious indication of God's plural nature, that God is more than one person. Mm-hmm. One other thing really quickly. When you go to the New Testament, you actually have this played out again. This whole scene is reenacted. It's reenacted on the Mount of Transfiguration, where once again you have two divine persons, the Father and the Son. And again, Moses is present. Right? Jesus goes up the Mount of Transfiguration, just like Moses took Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John. Just like Exodus 24 says that after 6 days Moses entered into the cloud, we're told that it was after 6 days that they went up the mountain and the cloud descended. And significantly, you have the same phrase repeated. The Father says of the Son, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him, obey him." It's the same covenant language that you find in Exodus 23. You must listen to him, or I will be an enemy to you. But if you listen to him, I'll be an enemy to your enemies, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's gonna check out the super chatters here real quick. Lily R, God bless you, David. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Let's see who else we have here. Let's scroll down. Jesus is Lord says, "Thank you for being the window to a new revival. We desperately need it." Well, these are good times to be a Christian apologist, and so I keep telling people if you want to reach people with the gospel and you want to share evidence for Christianity, there's never been a better time in the history of Christianity to do that for lots of reasons. One, think about this right here, right? 10 years ago, Christians couldn't have dreamed of this, right? So for 2,000 years of Christianity, Christians couldn't have dreamed of a situation where you could jump on live and be talking to people in India and in the Middle East and Africa, around the world. You couldn't even have thought of something like that. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is that now people are interacting with each other much more. So for many generations, you basically had the Christian West and other things out east. Whereas now, as has been pointed out, if you're on a college campus, you're going to run into Muslims. If you're in any sort of major city, you're going to run into Muslims. And throughout quite a bit of Christian history, you had to live in certain places if you wanted to ever talk to Muslims, or you had to travel to the Middle East, where you're going to get your head chopped off if they start listening to you. And so these are just awesome times. And so it's a cool period to be in. Jordan Marshall said, "Hey David, I heard you used to bodybuild. Did you compete? And would you return back to it?" No, I used to lift weights, right? I used to lift weights. I used to hit the gym. I was pretty big and I was pretty strong. I used to use a 135, which lots of people who dabble in working out would use that as bench press weight. I used to do curls with 135 pounds. I always had a problem with working out because when I was I don't know if you can see this, but when I was I have a massive scar here. When I was like, it's like my earliest memory, possibly. It's one of my earliest memories, at least. But I broke that when I was a kid, and they said I wasn't going to have full use of my arm anymore. It works pretty well, but it doesn't straighten out completely, so I can never do bench press much, right? My elbow would start feeling like linguine after like 2 sets, so I can never get big, get a big chest and so on. So people would start telling me I looked completely out of proportion. I would end up with these huge arms and not a comparable chest because I couldn't do a lot of workout due to my elbow injury. So anyway, not that most people are interested, but since someone was interested, that's my history of working out. So no, there could never be any competition unless someone wants to build a time machine and go back and keep me from snapping my elbow when I was little. All right, there are actually so many comments here that I'm having trouble scrolling through them because it's jamming as I'm scrolling through them. So I'm sure that I have missed some super chatters. If this catches up later on here, I'll be able to catch up with those. So for those of you who've jumped in on super chat, and I know because I saw them, but it's not letting me scroll to them now. So sorry about that. Wanted to respond quickly to 2 more comments from patrons, and then with whatever time we have left, we will, Anthony, you start looking at any comments you might want to address over in the chat. One is here from Lily. Said, "I know this Muslim family. One of the family members is extreme and has tried for many years to convert me. I shared your videos, but it just got him angry." Well, I tend to have that effect on people. But it sounds like, given what you say here, it sounds like he's going to get upset about any challenges to Islam. So she said, I showed him many hadiths. He said that if I don't know Arabic, I shouldn't be quoting hadiths. How do you suggest that I can show them that many hadiths are trustworthy? Now, there are lots of points to keep in mind here. But these issues are actually going to keep coming up because we hear about these things all the time. Now notice, it was okay for them to try to convert you, but as soon as you start challenging Islam, people get angry. And then they start making excuses for why you can't actually present them with information. Now I'm sure they were fine presenting you with arguments or with reasons that you should reject Christianity and believe in Islam. But as soon as you start trying to do that in reverse, hey, look at these problems in your Muslim sources, then it's, oh, this only works in Arabic. So one, you need to apply that same rule to them. If this only works in Arabic, then you can't talk about the Bible or can't say that the Bible's wrong or disagree with any teaching of Christianity because you don't speak Koine Greek. You're not a master of Koine Greek. So stop saying any objection to Christianity. You just get to let me speak, right? Now, no Muslim is going to want to accept that because deep down they understand how ridiculous it is. So one, you want to point that out. But two, you'll want to follow that through to its logical conclusion. Now, this normally gets brought up with the Quran. Don't criticize the Quran because you're not a master of classical Arabic. But here we find a Muslim using it with the hadiths. Don't bring up the hadiths. And so there's a simple way to respond to this, namely that if Islam can't be understood, if we can't understand what Muhammad said in other languages, then how can this be the religion for all people? How can Islam be the religion for all people if it can only be understood in one language? Because think about this. They want you to convert to Islam. You said they're trying to convert you to Islam. But what are you supposed to convert based on, right? They're giving you what Islam teaches in English. But I thought these things were untranslatable, right? So if they can reliably communicate the message of Islam to you, if they can reliably communicate what Allah has said and what Muhammad has said to convert you to Islam, why can't Muhammad Muhsin Khan, who translated Sahih al-Bukhari, communicate what Muhammad said there, right? In other words, if translation is off the table and these things just cannot be understood in another language, then why are they trying to preach to you? They're assuming what they're saying is impossible, right? They're assuming that they can communicate the message of Islam to you without you knowing Arabic, and yet then they're denying it when you're using the same reasoning to criticize Islam. And you know, just if you want to jump right in there, just say, okay, how would I convert to Islam if I wanted to? And the response would be, you have to say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And then you should respond to that and say, but I don't speak Arabic. They're like, oh, we'll tell you what it means. Oh, you're going to translate? You're going to translate that for me? You're going to tell me what it means? Okay, well, if that can be translated, why can't hadiths be translated? Because that comes from hadiths, by the way. That's not a quote from the Quran. That comes from the hadiths. So if that can be translated from the hadiths, why can't these other things be translated from the hadiths? And if you're going to say, oh, well, you know, the Muslims who translated the hadiths are liars. Well, how do I know you're not lying, right? So anyway, there are all kinds of things you can use to respond to that. All right, one last comment here from patrons. This comes from Warren. How do you broach this topic with other Christians who have drunk the Kool-Aid and accept the media narrative about Islamophobia and not true Islamism? Have you found success talking with Christians with the aggressive tone you take in your videos? I'm Catholic, and most of the Catholic leadership see Islam as a peaceful religion and a brother religion. Yeah, Robert Spencer is no longer Catholic, but he was, and he ran into all kinds of problems trying to share with the Catholic Church basic factual information about Islam. So you ask here, have you found success talking with Christians with the aggressive tone you take in your videos? Well, my aggressive tone in my videos isn't designed for Christians or to convince Christians. I think over time, Muslims are going to convince Christians of the true message of Islam. And what I do is, once there's some big event, a terrorist attack or something, and that's when Christians are jumping in saying this has nothing to do with Islam, that's when these issues come up for discussion. Once something has happened and Christians are saying this has nothing to do with Islam, that's when you open up the Muslim sources and show that no, this is exactly the sort of thing that Muhammad called for and that Allah commands. And so it's kind of a difficult process, and the reason is, think about this. The media are telling people basically one message. Islam is wonderful, Islam is peaceful. Politicians are telling basically one message. Islam is wonderful, Islam is peaceful. The entire education system is telling people one message. Islam is wonderful, Islam is peaceful. Hollywood is telling people one message. Islam is wonderful, Islam is peaceful. And then so if we come along, just in a YouTube video or something like that, and say, no, actually, Muhammad commanded his followers to violently subjugate the entire world until it's one Islamic monolith, you say, you have to be wrong. Well, why do I have to be wrong? Because everyone else is telling me something else. So if you just think about the situation here, where it's us, a few people, who actually read the Muslim sources, trying to tell the world what Islam actually teaches, when everyone is telling them something else, right? They're constantly bombarded with claims that Islam is a wonderful religion of peace. And so there's really lopsided power structure here, where everyone's telling people one thing, and we're the voices trying to show from the Muslim sources what Islam actually teaches. So that might be discouraging, but guess what? When people change their minds, it's usually over in our direction, right? Most people who change their mind were not people who once thought Islam is violent and now think that it's wonderful and peaceful. It's normally people who thought it was wonderful and peaceful, and then they actually did some studying and found out otherwise. So the encouraging part there is, if people who have all of the main power structures in the world, education, Hollywood, politicians, the media, all telling them one thing, and they still catch on to what Islam actually is, that should be encouraging, that people can catch on. And so as for right now, we just have to do it kind of how we're doing it. We have to use the little platforms we have, whether it's on YouTube or a blog or Facebook. We have to use these platforms, and it's got to be just one or two people at a time. But eventually, if you reach a kind of critical mass, then you're going to see things change. Because if enough people realize what Islam teaches, so that we can talk about it honestly and can actually have honest, open discussions on CNN or in a movie or on a university campus, that's when things are going to change very rapidly. And so that's just how we have to do it now. Now we have a couple of minutes left. Anthony, what do you want to respond to over in the comments section?
Yeah, two things really quickly. I saw one person say, ask the question, but did Jesus punish Israel? I'd say two things there in response to that. First of all, he's asking that in light of my citation of Exodus 23, which refers to the divine name-bearing messenger whom God says if Israel rebels against him, he will punish Israel for her sins. And so when you look in the Old Testament, you actually find that, in fact, the divine messenger did, in fact, punish Israel when she rebelled against him. One example of this is in Judges 2:1, where it says, now the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up out of Egypt. Note how the angel of the Lord speaks. This is a tip-off to the identity of this particular messenger. I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land which I have sworn to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And as for you, you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars. But you have not obeyed me, you have not listened to me, same term in Hebrew. What is this you have done? Therefore I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they will become as thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a snare to you. When the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept. So they named the place Bochim, and there they sacrificed to the Lord. So here you have an Old Testament passage of the angel of the Lord doing exactly what the Lord said he would do in Exodus 23 if Israel sinned. But then secondly, there are numerous statements in the New Testament where Jesus says that because Israel is on the precipice of rejecting him, he in turn is going to wreak vengeance upon them. You have numerous parables. In fact, just go start in Matthew 21, go to Matthew 22, Matthew 23, Matthew 24. You have parable after parable where Jesus says to the religious leaders what's going to happen to Israel as a result of rebelling against him. And the evidence is plain as day. Israel picked out a generation after rejecting Jesus. And so, in fact, Israel was punished for rejecting the Messiah.
Now, was there one more you said?
No, the
okay, so the two were related. Okay.
Yeah, Old Testament, okay. New Testament. And
all right, well, we have a ton of comments left, but we also have the problem of we're out of time. And I know plenty of people would like to keep going, but keep in mind we're going to be here every night for at least the next 2 weeks, not including weekends, for an hour each time. So I mentioned earlier in the program that we're going to look through the comments because I'm controlling a lot of things here as far as the programs, and so don't see a lot of them, but we'll scroll through the comments, especially in the comments once this is its own video. Then people can post comments in the comments section, and we'll pick some there that we didn't get to, but if we'd seen them, we would have gotten to. And then tomorrow night, we will go through a couple of those. So we will respond to questions we get on Patreon. So again, Anthony's Patreon page, which he just started today, is in the description box. If you want to sign up there, you can send him questions that you'd like us to address tomorrow, and we can actually have those up and ready on the screen. And apart from that, we'll be back tomorrow night, deal with the questions from our patrons, deal with the questions that we missed today, and then go on to some more of the chat. So again, we're learning this as we go along. This went pretty well considering it was our first time, and should be running even more smoothly tomorrow. So we'll see you all again tomorrow night for Answering Islam Live. And I actually don't know how to turn this off. There's a button down here in the corner that says finish. I'm guessing that is the correct button, and I'll have to look on this other screen to see if it actually stops. So, Anthony, get ready for some sort of cool stare while we see if this actually turns off.